purposes, there isn't any real amplification officer. Everybody, hi, thank you for coming to the meeting tonight. My name is Arn Franzen. I'm with the Department of Public Space and Urban Forestry. I'm the project manager for the Healey Schoolyard development, and I'm really happy to be here tonight. This is the fourth meeting in the Healey Schoolyard planning, and tonight we'll be presenting what is the final plan for the schoolyard. We've had a series of meetings which have led up to this point, and I'm really happy to be able to share the plans to date. I just wanted to express a couple of messages. I had been talking to Ward Councilor Jesse Clingan. He was hoping to get to the meeting tonight. He has a number of conflicts. He may be able to join us later, but he wanted to extend his thanks to everyone. Jesse's been a great supporter, great advocate for this project. So just wanted to thank him for his support. I also wanted to thank the Somerville School Committee and their staff, from Mary Skipper on down. The principal at the Healey School and the vice principal have been very helpful in terms of coordinating meetings and getting us some critical input on the design. I also wanted to thank the Somerville Housing Authority, who will have a big piece of this project, and it is a partner. And last but not least, the Friends of the Healey, who have been a great community advocate group who have championed this project for a long time. Let me just touch a little bit on the history of the project, especially within the last year. I think a lot of people are familiar with the long-term history of the project, going back to the development of the Healey Mystic Master Plan. This project is based on the goals of that master plan. It is not the same thing, but it is based on the similar goals. So the people who informed that process should be very happy to see that many of those ideas are seeing their fruition here. In the last year, I think we've made significant input. I think we had our first community meeting on this project about a year ago. We met with the public and got input. We then took that input to develop an RFP, and we hired Warner Larson Associates, a great landscape architecture firm, to lead this project. We then had our second community meeting with Warner Larson in July, and we had a series of smaller community meetings. I don't know if anybody here attended those or not, but we met with attended the Mystic Housing Picnic in August. We also attended the Mystic Housing Tenants Association in August. There was a Healey open house, which we attended here in September. We then followed that up with a meeting with Healey teachers and got their input on the plans. And we had our third community meeting here just a little while ago on the 10th. And then more recently, we had another follow-up meeting with Healey school teachers and a group of students about a week and a half ago. And all of that input has been critical to this process, and the design that we're showing tonight is a reflection of all that input. Another critical piece of the design, what was very helpful, is a community survey that was issued. Thank you to everybody who participated in that and who got us responses on that community survey. That input has also been very instrumental in the development of the design. So thank you, everybody. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the Warner Larson team, and we'll get started with tonight's meeting. I just wanted to say thank you again to Warner Larson. We're going to be working on this project for a long time. We are still essentially in the early stages of this project, as this is the design phase. There is still more design to go with regards to the next phase of the project, which will be the field component, and then there's the construction phase. So we still do have a ways to go, but I just wanted to say thank you again to Warner Larson as we're moving forward. Their team has been great. So David, let me hand you the microphone and you can take over. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arn. My name is David Warner, principal at Warner Larson Landscape Architects. With me tonight, Samir Boite, Andrew Lowe, and Emily Hunt. And we're representing about 50% of the people here. So, and the drum beat just stopped. So it's bringing me back to my elementary school days when I used to play the drums. Anyway, that's good. We can hear a little bit better now. So we actually have an exciting presentation for you tonight where it's the culmination of those three meetings that Arn just reiterated. And I will get to that timeline in just a second, where now we have a preferred concept where we've taken all of the input we've received from the community meetings, the informal meetings, the survey that was done, and we've also met with the teachers and the students. A representative group of students also joined us, which was a fun experience, and we've incorporated all of that into a preferred concept that we're excited to share with you tonight. So we're going to recap where we've come very, very quickly, and then show you the concept for the site plan, and get into some of the details about the play and furnishing materials. Yes? No, so this is not amplified. This is just for TV. Thank you. We're speaking to the people that are within arm's length, practically. So, all right, so this is the timeline that Arn was talking about, and right now we're here in November having your fourth meeting, our third meeting with you. And we're looking at meeting with the city from a budgeting standpoint and hopefully moving forward with construction of the schoolyard next year. So this plan is what we've shown previously, and it's the existing conditions. It shows the school building, the MWRA head house property, the parking area, the fact that the schoolyard is primarily all paved right now. And this is the large slope. One of the things that we always like to point out is that this is the boundary of the site, and a portion of the site is on the Housing Authority property, and that's where they come in as far as, you know, the relationship between the schoolyard and the housing. There's also the area over here that we'll be studying as far as access is concerned, and we'll be zooming in on the Tot Lot play area and the outdoor classroom. So at meeting number 2, we showed these 3 different use diagrams, and this is alternative C is what got the most support at that meeting, and it's basically how the various program elements that are desired in the schoolyard are situated on the site. And basically what you'll see in the final design is we're keeping true to that, with the courts here, the playground over in this corner, the field off to this side, which we'll show you a larger plan that shows the entire field area, and then some outdoor classroom space that's adjacent to the school garden, and then possible expansion over here for some nature play. This is a synopsis of the survey that was conducted. And I don't know if any of you responded to the survey. Your input is reflected in the results here. We had 133 people respond to this, and we think that was really good response rate. It was out, I think it was live for about 3 weeks or so, and then we compiled the information. And some of the, I think we got a pretty good representation of the various stakeholders, people from the neighborhood, teachers, parents. The 1% of students here, we then were able to reach out directly to the school and came in, sat down and met with a group of the students with their teachers, and we got more input directly from them, so after the study was concluded. But the 5 most desired play elements that came out of the study was having play space for the older children, of course. I mean, that's what's really missing out here in the schoolyard. Nature play elements were emphasized, and having something that for overhead climbing, monkey bars, rock climbing wall, that type of thing. And then swings, the basket swing is an inclusive type of swing where multiple people can swing in it. We'll show you the examples of those. And then having space, you know, for children to be in a more imaginative environment. So these are the 4 areas that we're going to be showing you in a little bit more detail. The schoolyard is in this area. The field and ramp will be showing an enlarged plan of that. The turnaround and getting safe access across that, and the Tot Lot. So first we'll start with the field and the accessible ramp. This is, I think Arn alluded to, is a subsequent phase. The schoolyard is the first phase. This would be phase 2 for construction. But we have to study the entire site to understand what space is needed for it and what we can build up to with the schoolyard in phase 1. And what this is zooming in on is, this is the corner of the MWRA property, and this is the slope, right? So right now, you have a staircase that winds its way up onto where the courts are here. This plan calls for completely eliminating that staircase at that end. We're keeping the staircase, of course, at the west end, southwest end. But this is a ramp system, a series of ramps and stairs that allows everybody who's coming from the lower level to the upper level to share the same route, as opposed to having people who can climb stairs go one way and people who have to go up a ramp go another way. This is a very inclusive design so that when people are walking up here, if they can climb the stairs, they can take these shortcuts, but people who are going up on the ramp can finish making the route up on the ramp. We are also studying these nodes here to make resting spots. So there'll be a little bit larger paved area with seating. We're also going to be incorporating lighting for security, and then revegetating that slope after the ramp is constructed. The field, which is a U12 size soccer field, would be synthetic turf, and we are going to need a retaining wall along this side in order to support the fill required. The field itself will be lowered from the existing grade that the courts are now by maybe about 4 to 5 feet, and there will be a grade transition getting back up to the schoolyard right here. So that will also have sports lighting associated with it. So if you've seen the field at Capuano or the new field at East Somerville Community School, those have sports lighting on them. This field is also planned to have sports lighting. That's what these 4 structures are here. Oh, one more thing regarding this. We are planning on getting rid of moving the dumpster that's located here and putting it next to the existing dumpster that's over in this corner in order to allow this ramp system to be constructed. And this is what we envision that ramp looking like. Basically laying on the slope with minimal amount of retaining walls, with the ramps splayed apart so that the spaces in between can be re-landscaped and vegetated. So a concrete ramp with handrails coming to landings such as this, with stairs that will shortcut between those intermediate levels and the upper level. This is an example that's up at the High Plains School in Andover. I don't know if anybody's been up there, but this is constructed. That's where we took these pictures. And we thought it was a really good example of what we're trying to accomplish here. So the Tot Lot, and this I'm sure might be a recap for some of you who attended the last meeting. What we're planning on doing here is replacing the engineered wood fiber with poured-in-place rubber surfacing. We're refurbishing the existing play equipment and adding more play elements to it. So these are, and the other thing that we can do with the poured-in-place rubber surfacing is use shape and landform, such as this mound here, that's made out of poured-in-place rubber, and we can introduce those in the play area to add more, a fun and experience for children. The play panels, we're planning on locating on the far side over here, and those don't need rubber surfacing associated with them. That would tie into a seating area underneath these trees, which is a little bit more passive space, kind of a picnic boardwalk type of space. And then also we're thinking about incorporating one of these granite benches over here and reconfiguring the fence to capture a little bit more of the sidewalk space and round that area out. These are just a couple of other examples of the type of play elements that we think we can add in there as well. So the next spot is the access across the traffic circle. Right now, as you all know, there really is no crosswalk and getting from the main entrance to the school over to the top of the big staircase here. And we believe the best way to do that is to minimize the distance that students have to cross a vehicular way. And we know that visibility is an issue, especially in the morning with the solar glare. So instead of putting the students over here, we think that this point, getting over to this island and then getting over to here, minimizes the overall distance of the driveway width in terms of crossing. You have cars exiting there, you have one lane of cars exiting here. You don't have turning movements of cars passing each other there, which would make it more difficult as a crossing point. And it also provides an accessible route to the flagpole. So the flagpole could be used ceremonially if someone was in a wheelchair, for instance. And we haven't finalized the crosswalk pattern design, but here's a couple of fun ways of making it more playful. We'll be thinking about that as we move into design development. And then the outdoor classroom, which is the existing space right now that we want to make it accessible. And we think that the planters can be structured a little bit higher, a little bit easier to maintain. This is an example down here of a project we did in Brighton. That's the Edison School in Brighton, where the planters are a little bit easier to work with than when they're down low on the ground as they are now. And then having some workspace out there as well. So this is a view into the outdoor classroom now, and that's the actual space. We want to straighten up the granite and bring in an accessible stone dust pathway. Maybe put in a whiteboard so the teachers have the ability to use that for instruction. And then this is an example of a shed in the same schoolyard, actually, at the Edison School, where the shed was a teaching tool. And we're still exploring ideas for storage. We want to do something that's custom and unique for your school. But this was an interesting shed where we basically had a black rubber roof and a green roof with water runoff coming from them via a spray head, where the students could measure the quantity, the rate, the temperature of the water coming off. So the shed became a teaching tool. So now, getting to the meat of the presentation, the schoolyard. I bet this little girl was coming here for this part of the presentation, right? What your new schoolyard is going to be. We had, at the last meeting, an exercise where we gave out stickers to everybody, and we asked you to vote on what you liked most. And recognizing we had 24 votes, if you think about all of the stakeholders in the community and how many people are represented at these meetings, we saw this as a pretty even split in terms of how people saw the two different options. And basically, this one was as Hawk Hub and this one as Mountain Meander. The main differences between them were really in the play space itself, where this pathway comes in flush, goes up to a level that may be 7 feet high, 6 or 7 feet high, and then connects all the way back down to grade again. This plan starts and kind of meanders around a lot more and gets to a high point where you can get onto a bridge, onto a play structure, turn around, and then go back down the way you came, or run up and down the side slopes. We then met with the teachers and the students, like I was saying, and presented the two options to them and had a really good, healthy conversation about how they're going to live in that space on a daily basis, how they're going to play in that space, how they're going to monitor it. And these are the things that we heard from the teachers, where when it came to their taking a vote, a preference of which direction they wanted, they landed on the Hawk Hub because they liked the idea of central visibility, where this space is all open, and it takes fewer adults to see all the kids at any one point in time. They liked the complete loop, all going up and then being able to connect back down, thinking about the circulation through the playground and how this can be one continuous connection, and also then continue around some of the other paved areas. They did like the leaf-shaped shade structure, which we have up in this corner. We've got images. We're going to show you what that looks like. And having that near the cafeteria, having movable tables in that area so that they can clear it out and use it for all kinds of different activities when the weather isn't favorable. And then we had shown 2 basket swings versus 1, and they liked the idea of having 2 basket swings as well. So one of the things about the Mountain Meander plan that they gravitated to, though, was having a little bit more structured seating, the spectator space, where you could be right next to the field and in a more of like a bleacher style seating arrangement. So This is the plan that was presented previously, and you can see we had a little more informal seating arrangement here. So we've now created a hybrid and brought the best of those ideas together in the preferred concept, which is this. So I'm going to walk through all 18 of these items, and when I get to the end of that, if there are any questions, it might be a good place to pause and talk about the site plan. If you have any questions, I can clarify before getting into more detail. So we have preserved the fully accessible loop coming around through the Hawk Hub playground. We have a climbing structure at this, a primary climbing structure at this location with an overlook area that has a bridge connection to it. And then we kept the basket swings, but we moved them from inside the loop to outside, knowing that, you know, as kids run and play, you kind of don't want kids running through the swings. You want to have them a little off to the side. That's why we kind of tucked these over here. And then we have a climbing wall element right here. So this is higher, and this is all down at the lower elevation. And we've got a wall that kind of winds its way through between there. And when I show you images of the climbing wall, that's the location that we're talking about. And the leaf shelter, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, the multi-use shelter. Thinking about that as a outdoor classroom, stage, performance, physical fitness location. Kids can, the school can use that for all kinds of different activities. And we've got this stepped seating up against the wall there, thinking about that as a bit of an amphitheater type space. So we're also looking at the grade change between here and the basketball court and thinking about warping that asphalt plane up so that that also is kind of a sloped condition. This component over here is a wall that takes a synthetic turf panel and tips it towards the basketball court. You'll see a recurring theme here where we've kind of warped the panels over here to make the courts a little bit more of an open space. And then at the top of it, we've got an idea of how that can actually have a sculptural element incorporated in the play space. And of course, all the way through the playground space, you know, having a trike track for scooters or small tricycles. The spectator seating that I mentioned previously. Having an adult fitness zone, which we've been presenting in both of the options previously. For those of you who are just joining us, please come in. And this microphone is working for cable television. It's not supposed to be amplified, so if you want to sit close to be able to hear, you're welcome to. And then next to this, having a passive green space. We're looking at this as kind of like being this green space in the heart of the schoolyard between the field and the hard surface play and the playground area. So painted graphics and games, all of this paved space that connects these elements are locations where we're going to be animating those with play games on the pavement. And then we have these two courts. We're calling this one a multi-sport court, and this one is a basketball. Of course, you can play basketball on both of them, but this would be dedicated as basketball. And we're actually looking at the possibility of keeping this as a multi-sport court that could allow for street hockey or small kids soccer. But I'll show you examples of that later on. You've got a couple other installations in the city. If we were to cut back on something in this design, that might be something that gets scaled back. If budget is an issue, you know, and we might end up with just 2 basketball courts. If you have any opinions on that, we'd like to hear. We are adding a lower, smaller basketball goal, calling it a youth hoop here on the side of this court, and then the wall ball element over here that we've been talking about all along. The entry point into at this point here where you're coming from the school, you're coming up from down below, you're coming from the parking lot, you're entering, we see this as a significant moment in the design, and we're thinking that it can be animated with something sculptural, maybe a kinetic type of wind sculpture, because every time we've been up there, it's on the site, almost every time, it's been pretty windy. And we think that really might be a point of identity for the schoolyard. And then, of course, the field. So, like I said before I started reading through all these 18 items, I I was just going to pause for a minute and see if there's any questions at all relative to the various elements that we're showing in the design. We're going to get into more detail and show you what they are, what they look like, but any questions? Yes?
In the Tot Lot right now, there's a buddy bench. Is that incorporated into the design anywhere?
So the question was, in the Tot Lot area, there's an existing buddy bench, and whether it's incorporated in the design. There are some elements on the schoolyard that we are thinking about reusing, and this area along the back, along here, seems like a really good place to incorporate that type of bench, and I think maybe some of the other volunteer benches those benches that were constructed by volunteers, those wood benches, we're thinking that might be a good location for them along the back edge. Any other questions? Yes?
I apologize for being late and locked out and missing the Tot Lot display. Are you replacing the structure or making changes to the structure? Because right now it's the children that are older than the kids that actually use it. And if someone has pushed the kid around in a wheelchair for 2 weeks, someone fractures his leg on the structure. My concern is for the younger children making that replacement.
Okay. Yes, so let me repeat the question so that everybody hears. The question was whether we are going to replace the structure or make it age appropriate, right? And we are making that existing play structure age appropriate. We have had the manufacturer's representative evaluate it and tell us exactly what we need to do in order to make it age appropriate for the young children. And we will be retrofitting it. We won't be replacing that. We'll be adding more play elements in there and retrofitting that existing structure to be age appropriate. The specific changes to the play structure, we're taking one of the climbing elements off and putting a play panel on it, because do we know the specifics of the retrofit that we can talk to? Or? So this is Emily Hunt, and she's been talking to the playground manufacturer directly about those changes.
So some of the improvements went in this past summer. So that's the monkey bars, I think, are gone. There is a panel up just to make it more age appropriate for the 2 to 5, since that structure was originally rated 5 to 12. But we are in touch with the play manufacturer. So I know during one of the teachers' meetings, it was really important to have a more open slide. Right now, it's currently a covered slide. So that's something we're keeping in mind. We'll be working with the play manufacturer to see if there are any other pieces we could add or possibly remove. Because I noticed too, I think one of the handrails was a little bit off. It seemed maybe a little bent. So that's something that we'll keep in mind. And I think Arn might have something else to say.
All right, thank you, Emily. When we renovated the Tot Lot last summer, we took that play structure, which had been rated as a 5 to 12 structure, and then modified it. So it is now code compliant as a 2 to 5 structure. So the elements which made it a 5 to 12 structure, a structure for older kids, were removed. Those were some of the climbing elements, some of the access points. I do think that that existing structure could use more modifications. When we've looked at it during the last renovation last summer, we saw some features that we thought could be improved, whether that would be panels at the lower level of the structure, making more use of that space, and then replacing some of the stair elements and the railing elements, which were still perfectly functional and perfectly safe, but just look tired. So we want to renovate that structure, give it a crisper appearance, and then make some changes to make it a more useful structure in terms of how kids use it. And then, as David said, then we're adding additional features. And Kim, one of the other things we talked about earlier before you came in was a space up in the front of the playground on the street side is being changed. So we're talking about having some deck elements in there for seating next to the trees, and then expanding the corner of that space out into the sidewalk area so that there's a greener, more natural space at that end of the playground as you come in. So think those are the major changes. And I think one of the other things we're talking about is up in the corner here, you can see where the new rubber port-in-place safety surface can be shaped. So rather than just having it be a flat static element, it can be shaped so that kids can run around and over it. And that seemed to be a nice feature that teachers had responded to in discussions. So, thank you. These are features that we're talking about, what are the types of things that we could include? So these aren't not definite items to be included, but these are the types of things where we want to put in. So we don't have the exact features which will go in. We'll continue those discussions, but teachers had said that they thought that some individual or stationary elements would help with the design. And we did put in some features that are out there now, the things we put in last summer. I think that some of those have been successful. We've heard some comments about one of them in particular that people didn't think it was as successful as we thought it might be. So that'll be one of the things that we'll take out.
Okay, so we've got a fair amount more I'd like to share with you tonight, so I'm going to move forward. There'll be more opportunity for taking questions a little bit later. One of the things that we wanted to touch on is some of the things that we're doing with this playground renovation that are making the site much more sustainable from an environmentally responsible perspective. And I'll point these out on the plan as well. We are incorporating permeable paving and a lot of permeable surfaces, not just paving. For instance, synthetic turf for the field is permeable, and that's going where everything is just asphalt right now. So there'll be a lot more opportunity for stormwater infiltration. We're incorporating a lot of trees, and those trees will provide much needed shade and also help to mitigate the effects of the extremities in wind and temperature, and making the space more comfortable, more habitable. So with regard to microclimate and habitat, the tree canopy is a significant improvement, but also along the slope we want to help to manage the invasive species over time by removing some and then replanting with native trees. That'll help with the biodiversity goals of the city. And of course, when we're selecting materials that go in here, using materials that have recycled content, they're durable, they'll last for a long time, and as much as possible sourced locally or within a reasonable distance, and not having a lot of embodied energy in the production and shipping them to the site. Lighting is another important aspect to it. We are going to be putting lights at the synthetic turf field, which I said. Those are very similar to the ones that were just installed over at the East Somerville Community School in Winter Hill. LED, very sharp cutoff, and very good about controlling light, and they're dark sky compliant. Then for the basketball courts, we'll also light those. And we're looking at this type of fixture here for that, either potentially salvaging and reusing the fixtures that are there, and you know what those look like. Those are nice, relatively new LED fixtures. And if our electrical engineer said, no, those aren't worth salvaging, then we'll specify something similar. It will look like this. But we wanted to show you what this really means in terms of the surface areas. And we zoomed in on primarily the schoolyard space. This may look a little different than the previous plans, but it's the same orientation and same proportion as the previous plans. This is the building off on the left, the school building. And this is the MWRA site over here and the parking driveway. And right now, all of this orange color is paved surfaces. And the blue represents what is not paved. So areas which are exposed to the ability to absorb water. On the right is the proposed design showing the impervious, which is orange, and the pervious surfaces, which are blue. Blue represents the synthetic turf. It represents landscaped areas. It represents permeable pavers, which go down through this tree zone, which we have structural soil underneath them, so they're going to grow to be nice, big, healthy trees. And then the poured-in-place rubber surfacing is also permeable, and the landscaped areas around there. So we have about a 24% increase in the permeable surfaces with this proposed design. And you know, the areas that will continue to shed water, for instance, like this court will pitch towards that permeable surface and will be absorbed into the ground. This area continues to pitch off this edge, which flows onto the lawn, which is also a very permeable surface. We obviously didn't color anything off-site, but the MWRA parcel is all, almost all lawn. And so that is also an absorption zone. So these are some of the schoolyard, primary schoolyard elements that we have in the design, and then we're going to drill down and look at things in a little bit more detail. We have fitness. We're going to be using landform. Like I said, that playground with the accessible walkway that goes up and comes back down, we've got a landform element associated with that. This is what the multi-sport court looks like. The schoolyard, this is an image of another installation, but seeing a synthetic turf field with a track around it, the track also would be synthetic turf because it overlaps the field in our case. And then having the adjacent schoolyard with structured play, incorporating landscaping that's well protected within the play space, and having a freestanding wall ball. Now, these are a little bit more detailed about specific elements in the schoolyard design. This is an example of the leaf shelter that we were talking about with picnic tables underneath of it. Now, our design has picnic tables that are movable. They're not permanently anchored, so the school can use that space underneath the shelter for a lot of different types of activities. And do you remember that point around the basketball court where I said the asphalt paving kind of wraps up and we have this trike track that comes around? This is an example of what we were inspired by thinking about in the schoolyard, where kids that are on small bicycles or tricycles can actually kind of go up and around that. When we have a climbing wall within the playground space, it might not be quite as tall as this, but this is an example of a climbing wall and integrated within a play space. The terraced benching that we have by the multi-use shelter outside of the cafeteria could look something like this, where we have this wood benches that terrace up and forms an amphitheater type of an effect. The bleacher style seating that's adjacent to this, the soccer field, the U12 soccer field, we're thinking is going to look something like this, where we have individual ledges that could have the turf element in there to make it a soft and comfortable surface to sit on. And then that warped plane adjacent to the multi-sport court that has the sculpture element on it, you know, could look something like this. And then we have on the periphery, going back, up in this area over here, we're thinking largely a birch and pine kind of plant material palette. And we have another slide going into more detail about plants, so we can focus on that in a minute. So this is a 3D model that we created quickly to help envision what that spot would look like next to the multi-sport court, where we have this warped plane, and then a low wall. And you know, we're thinking that this could be something where the school pride is incorporated. Maybe it's H with wings on it, you know, for the Hawks. But we could envision this is a spot where the school will want to take all their class pictures maybe after it gets built. And a nice place to watch the basketball games. So now we're down at the field level, and you can see how we're, you know, maybe about 4.5, 5 feet lower than the schoolyard. This is the front of the building, front of the school up here, and this is the back over here. And what this is doing is ramping down, coming across this spectator seating spot, the adult fitness area up above, and then kind of the end of that row of trees coming through the middle with a bit of an overlook here, and then this grove of trees that crosses through to create that passive park-like feel. And from there, you have a really great view down to the field space. This track material would be the same synthetic turf because the soccer field, that's part of the overrun space for the soccer field. But the first phase of the schoolyard would stop pretty much at the top here because all of this area needs to be excavated when the field gets constructed. And we want to preserve the outdoor courts until the time that it's necessary to construct the field. This is the example of one of the sports lighting stanchions on the corner, near the corner of the field. So now we want to focus on the play structures themselves within the playground and show you what we're thinking. This is one of the play structures that we showed at the last meeting, and it is made by one of the companies that makes a lot of play structures and sells a lot of play structures to the city of Somerville, Boston, and other municipalities where they have a very good price point and quality and durability, and they have great representation from a manufacturer's standpoint. So they will service equipment very well. And what we are thinking is that this would be the basis of design, meaning that this project would use this as a, in the specifications, and any other manufacturer that wants to bid on this job would have to produce something that is similar, not necessarily an exact match, but similar in terms of its quality, durability, appearance, but there is the possibility that another manufacturer would actually win the bid, and we would hold them to that standard. But some of the comments that we heard back from the last meeting and also from our meeting with the teachers and the students is that they really liked the idea of having an accessible bridge connection to this intermediate level. And what you're seeing here with this structure, it's a little bit larger than what we're able to incorporate within this school space, but it's very similar in terms of the types of components. So you'd have like a two-level play element where you can get into the intermediate level from a bridge that is a rigid bridge that someone in a wheelchair can go over, not a rope bridge by itself that would leave them sitting off on the side, anybody who might need a wheelchair. But a lot of people really liked the rope bridge element for its challenge, for its thrill, and this type of play structure allows us to do both. And this has a lot of different climbing options within it, and it also has overhead climbers as well. So for instance, monkey bar type of things and that. So we have a couple more detailed views of it. You can see kids climbing through the tunnel, you know, between the two towers, and you can see where that's located here. Again, this is a little bit taller, a little bit bigger than what we're proposing. This manufacturer, we tried to get them to custom design one 3D to be able to bring tonight, but that was literally in production up to the last minute, and we couldn't get that off their computer in time. But we wanted to show you the type and character of the play equipment. You can have the slide elements that come off of it, and it's really got, you know, a lot of the things that everybody really liked, whether it's, you know, kind of a web climber and the bridges and the ropes and that sort of thing. So the fact that kids can get up high and get up to a point that's safe, these are going to give us a really good vantage point. Anybody that wants to climb up to that point can see over some of the mature trees and out to the river and over to the city of Boston. That's one of the things that's really pretty exciting about this play element, because it doesn't take up a huge amount of space, but you can have a lot of play value within it. And we're definitely going to be looking to customize it. You know, I think this manufacturer has been very good at working with us on many other projects and making things that are unique to each of the communities that we work in. And you know, this is something that we're excited about. So a couple other elements within this play space, the basket swing. So this is an example of the basket swing that we're talking about, and if you were to do two side by side, which we're planning to do, this is one manufacturer's sort of stylistic representation of a double basket swing. And then the school, when we met with teachers and students, really liked the idea of having some spinning element there. And this, whether it's an open dish or it's a little bit more of inspired by a traditional merry-go-round, we're thinking that a spinning dish type of element, as opposed to, say, one of those more web, you may have seen, you know, web elements that are also spinning. This would fit well. You know, the spatial limitations that we're working within, we need to find things that will work from the the usable safe zone around them as well. So the adult fitness area that I pointed to on the plan, these are the types of fitness components that we're looking at. So from a facilities maintenance standpoint and durability, we're looking at fitness equipment that has fixed components to it, not hydraulics, bearings, moving parts that can get damaged and wear out. So, whether, includes sit-ups and pull-ups, push-ups, climbing, these types of things, balance, overhead. This zone that we're talking about will have multiple fitness components in it so that people can work out together. It's not going to be like one of those fitness stations that has one element and then you move on to another location. It's kind of a social, almost like a gym type of experience when people want to come and work out. A couple people can be there, 2 or 3 people can be there together and have a bit more of a social experience working out. And this is the examples at a couple of locations within the city of Somerville showing the multi-sport court. And the reason why I alluded to the possibility of this not ending up in the project if we get into a value management towards the end of design that requires us to make some decisions, what's in the project and what's out. We think that because of the fairly significant cost for this particular component, we are suggesting that that might be one of those things, that we end up doing just another full-size basketball court instead of having this multi-sport court. The multi-sport court, how many of you are familiar with these 2 locations, have seen it in person? Okay, so I really don't need to explain how it works. How important do you think, and keep in mind with the total renovation here, ultimately you're going to have a field down below that will serve youth soccer, that having a multi-sport court, do you think that that would be advantageous, or would 2 basketball courts being able to play 2 games simultaneously might be preferable? Because when you have a multi-sport court, of course you're going to have competing uses for it. And we thought that it's essential to have at least 1 full-size basketball court based upon the survey results. But can I, maybe with a show of hands, see, is it important, do you feel that it's important to have a multi-sport court here, or should we say if that's going to be an optional element, is that a problem? I guess I didn't word that very well for a show of hands.
No, for those of you who came in late, there was an earlier slide which shows the playground, and one of the other features on the court, the multi-sport court, is a lower basketball hoop on the side. So in the slide that has the multi-sport court, you'll see on the side of it that there's also, like, number 15 is a lower hoop. So if we change this to a full court basketball, we could still keep that lower hoop on the side. So we've gotten different feedback from both teachers and some of the students as to the value of a multi-sport court. And so we just want to make sure that that's something that parents and kids see as something that will get used. There's a question of, like, what is its purpose? Who will use it? What sports will it be used for? Will it be used for street hockey? Would it be used for soccer? Or is the primary need for basketball? So these are all, some of the issues we're weighing.
Yes.
Before the vote happens on that,
Yes. Discussion.
would you just explain a little about the possible delay to the soccer field that we're looking at as a result of some austerity measures by the city? Dave has explained to me that you mentioned that the soccer field may be delayed beyond the initial timeline as a result of some austerity measures by the city. Trying to elaborate that way.
I think that one of the things, we've always considered this a phased project. This is a very large project that comes at a high price tag. And so one of the things that the city has to figure out is, while everybody is in full support of the project and the need for the project and all the components that have been discussed, one of the things that we need to figure out within City Hall and with the finance office is, how do we phase this, and what would be the time period for that? So ideally, you would do the schoolyard component. You can't do, I suppose in theory, you could build the soccer field at the same time, but I think that would be difficult in any case. So it would be a phased construction. The question is then, do you do the schoolyard and then transition straight into the soccer field, or do you do the schoolyard and then is there a gap between the time the schoolyard is done and the soccer field is constructed? And that question I can't answer. It is something that we are working on with the finance office in terms of what the city's capability is. This is a very large project, so we would be bonding for the cost of it, which means we're borrowing money to make it happen. The city has a lot of very expensive projects in the works, and this is one of them. So it's trying to figure out how to make that work. And there's a lot of people who are working on this. Again, ideally, we would transition from one phase into the next, but I can't confirm that at this point. So
I raise that here just because that could sway people's minutes from whether multi-sport court is going to select. If we're looking at maybe a 3-year delay between the two of them, that's going to make a multi-sport court. The soccer that happens here socially is important before school, recess time, after school.
sure, that is a good point. One of the things that we said earlier too is if it's a phased construction, you can imagine the schoolyard piece being done and then the soccer field being done later. Given that, the space at the soccer field, the basketball courts now are the space that will be occupied by the future soccer field. So that paved area would remain and be open for use, until the soccer field was constructed. So maybe there's the potential for that to be used as, a kicking space or for something else. Something like that. Yeah, there would be a I think so, and we could talk that through. I think that if you are familiar with the city's youth soccer program and the nets that are used with that program, that they are a movable net. So perhaps would be an opportunity to have a movable net, brought up here as a transition item, while that second phase is being coordinated.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe it was a little bit, I don't know, asking for a vote from such a small group of attendees. What I'm going to say is from the, and we definitely want to hear your opinions for sure. The survey results didn't really have a strong, passionate response for multi-sport court. There was interest in it. We've shown it in the plan. The fact that there's going to be a soccer field out there eventually, and the reality that we're going to be putting fencing behind the basketball court regardless. So if there were a movable soccer goal, for instance, underneath a basketball hoop, that could be used in that same sort of functionality for a temporary measure. So if anybody has any strong opinions for or against, I'd love to hear them, though. Yes?
I have a question about when the U12 field is built, will it be open to the school to play after school, before school, during school, or is it going to be taken by other groups after school, for example? Because there are definitely kids who play soccer before school, after school, and even with the field, making sure that there's a place where they can play.
So for those listening in, I'll just repeat the question. Will the soccer field, when it gets built, be available for the school's use during school, after school, before school?
I think we know that there's a real need for youth sports in the city and for the Healey kids and the community, the neighborhood in general. All the fields in the city are permitted through the recreation department. And so this field would be made available for youth soccer. And so if there's a youth soccer program that can make use of the field, they would reserve the field through the recreation department for games and practices. So it'd be available to them in terms of, like, I would imagine that, before and immediately after school are not necessarily the times that those fields will be programmed. I think that, the recreation department could easily work with the school department to figure out, an appropriate schedule. I think we want that space not only to be available to kids during the day for, PE classes and that sort of thing, but to the, to the community as well.
Can I just add
You had a question?
Oh, I was just going to comment that personally, I find the multi-use court a much better fit for a variety of reasons for the kids. Some kids just aren't into basketball, and I really appreciate having the built-in soccer field there. Some kids like to climb it. That's another way that I've seen it get used at Albany quite a bit. And just in general, like if there's, yes, kids can use it for other purposes, but if there's a basketball there, it's oftentimes like someone comes in with a basketball and they think like the whole court is theirs and no one else needs it for anything else. So I think having the option and the mosaic court or more versatile baseball court option just mentally prepares people like it can be used for other things and it's more inviting to all of the kids at the school and especially at a school where soccer is really important and there may be a delay of the field. For all of those reasons, I support the multi-sport court.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your sharing that. So these are different versions of what that could look like. Of course, you've got these two examples already in the city. It could be reduced in scale if necessary. This is actually the full version of it, which ties into a fence as well. These examples don't actually have these end panels on it, but we'll definitely take that into consideration. Yes? Yeah, I think at this early stage in the project, we'd like to be able to budget for what the community feels is going to make this playground unique, special, and meet your needs. So here are some examples of the seating that we have in the design. Like I pointed out in the plan by the shelter, we have that step seating up against the wall. Wouldn't go up as high as this, might be 3 tiers. But then we have over in the Tot Lot area, some low decking around the trees. This is an example of how that could look. Those of you who have been to Winter Hill at the upper level, we have a similar type of a deck situation. And then the space between the two basketball courts, the basketball and the multi-sport court, could have seating something like this. So kids can sit there facing the court, either direction, underneath a row of trees with those permeable pavers that we were talking about. That's an example of that. These are examples of the plant palette that we are proposing. So these are non-invasive, very urban tolerant. They also offer some seasonal interest. And I'll just point out a couple of different these different trees and the locations that we have in mind for them. So the Kwanzan cherry is a very robust, reliable, urban tolerant tree. We're proposing that in that over by the shelter, by the cafeteria. The birch and the pine, this is a little bit of a, it's a very beautiful picture of a forest. It won't really look quite like that, but around the playground where we're talking about more of a naturalistic pine and birch grove up against the edge of the property. The honey locusts are a tree that we like because they are very easy to maintain. They also don't cast a lot of leaf litter on the ground, so when we have that in that grove space by the adult fitness and the that passive passive plaza space, we think those are good trees for that. And then the red maples, and maybe you can tell me where you had them in mind for those, down the middle? Yeah, between the two basketball courts, more of a vase shape, upright, higher branching, and the London plane tree. Samir did a lot of the plant ideas, but where? Okay. So anyway, this is an example of Shadblow serviceberry, which is great fall color. It also has this fruit and a beautiful spring bloom. Offers some bird habitat as well. So this is a plan showing where Phase 1 schoolyard extents are. But it also includes the Tot Lot area over here. So the play structure, the main area, the swings and spinner elements inside here, the trike track and getting around throughout the whole space, the 2 courts, the adult fitness zone, and this whole passive green space here. That's the extent, and then of course the outdoor classroom that we're saying is part of this phase 1 construction. And that's because everything south of this point will need to be excavated and lowered from its existing grade. And then we would also in phase 2 be reconstructing the parking. This turnaround would get moved back. You'd lose 14 parking spaces in here when that field gets constructed. So phase 2 would be the synthetic turf, the spectator seating, and then the accessible ramp that I showed previously. So I'd like to open this up to any further questions that you have relative to where we are today with what we're calling the preferred concept. We're going to be moving into the design development phase of the project, where we're getting into very detailed material decisions, developing the specifications for the project, and then ultimately preparing construction documents and detailed cost estimates before going out to bid. And that's contingent upon the funding process through the city, which is ongoing. So do we have any questions about the preferred concept or anything I presented tonight? Oh, yes, of course. Thank you for reminding me. We brought all of these boards over here so that you're welcome to get up and walk around, take a look at these. We'll be around for a while following any questions that you have to answer questions one-on-one. Yes?
I assume you're looking at doing Brockville and infill for the turf field like at Somerville and Capital.
I think when the conversation comes to synthetic turf, we recognize that synthetic turf can provide a playable surface that natural grass would not. But with the number of users that it would get, synthetic turf is the solution to be able to do that. In terms of exactly what that material, what the infill material would be, I can't say. It would not be anything that presents any sort of health issue to the community. Because rockfill is a possibility, sandfill is a possibility. We would not be doing the rubber pelletized infill. We would be looking for alternative solutions with that. I don't know if people have seen the press recently. There's been articles in the Globe talking about, thank you, David. There's been articles in the Globe talking about PFAS, which is a chemical that's used in the manufacturing of synthetic turf fields. We do not have that in any of the city fields to date, and we would make sure that it's not included in any new synthetic turf fields. That's part of a much larger conversation, but we've gone back and looked at the fields that are there, and the recent fields that were installed don't contain PFAS. Many of the synthetic turf manufacturers don't include that in their manufacturing anymore. So I think that we don't see any health issues with regards to a synthetic turf field. So it could be Brockville. Brockville is still a new product. So we have it in the recent fields that were installed. We were anxious to sort of see how it performs. We want to make sure that whatever infill material is used is something that will stand the test of time. Anybody else? Yes?
Oh, yes, I'm
Good
glad you
question.
asked. That's a really good question. Will there be water fountains? So I guess this is a plan that I could point it out on. Right next to the adult fitness area, we do have a bottle filling drinking fountain. And we do also have irrigation that's going to be making sure that the landscaped areas survive and thrive. But thank you very much for that question. We're putting it here because that's a nice central location overall, but it's also adjacent to the field. Kids can go up there and refill their water bottles very easily in between, when they have breaks off the field. And also, if you're coming up here, anybody who's coming here to get a little workout in will have a place where they can get hydrated. Yes?
There's been some discussion about playgrounds in the city and restrooms, porta potties and things. Will there be any possibility for that as well for schools not investing in that training?
So the question is whether there would be provision for any portable toilets when school is not in session for public use? I don't, Arn. I was looking to you.
That's a very good question. There's been a conversation in the city about what are appropriate spaces to provide outdoor toilets. You can imagine there's lots of issues attached to that. The policy to date has been that outdoor toilets have been provided at recreation facilities. So that's a perfectly appropriate question for this site. We're going to put a soccer field in here. Will there be a space for porta potties? It is not something that we've talked about. It is not something. So we can have that conversation and see if there's an appropriate space for something like that. I think that makes sense. Yes.
Any other questions? I appreciate your coming out tonight and representing the larger community and being here. We are going to stick around if you want to come over and talk to us next to these boards and share any further thoughts. But really appreciate your continuing to come to these meetings. This concludes, let me get to the final slide, right? The public process associated with the design of the schoolyard, but it's not the end of the conversation. Arn is going to continue to be available as a point of communication, a conduit to us, so we'll be able to continue to hear from you with any thoughts or ideas that you have. As we move into the design development phase, things will start to solidify and become less flexible to change. And then once we get into construction documents, that's when things are pretty much locked down. So I would encourage you, if you have any more thoughts or ideas, to reach out to Arn, send him an email, and we can take those into consideration. So thank you very much. Do you have any further remarks?
No, just wanted to say thank you again to everybody. This has been a great process. I think we've had a lot of input from the community, from neighbors, from the students and the teachers, and this has been a really rewarding process for us. We're really happy with the design that we've created. We think it truly reflects the needs of the community and the conversations we've had with everyone. But that said, we will be moving into the construction document phase. So I think that people are happy with the design. If people have any thoughts about the design, as David said, I am available. I'd be happy to talk to you. And while this is the final meeting to talk about what the design of the schoolyard will be, it doesn't have to be, the final, community meeting on this project. I'd be happy to meet with groups or to talk to larger groups as the project moves forward. And, if you represent a group or you have questions about the project, I'd be happy to talk to you at any point. There's a city webpage. If you've been seeing the emails, there's a link to the city webpage. You can sign up for updates there as things continue to develop. We will post things on the webpage so you can go and see where we stand. When we have confirmation of the funding and when that's happening, we'll send out updates to everyone so that people are aware of that. The Ward 4 City Councilor Jesse Clingan will be apprised of everything as we move forward, and I'm sure that he'll be relating that information to the community as well. But I just wanted to say thank you again for coming, and thank you for everybody who's been a part of this process.
Make sure you sign in if you haven't already. It would be great to make sure we know who was here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah. Absolutely.
Great. That's good. I'm excited.
Good. I think there's something.